In a debut novel titled Worlds Apart, Dr. Carol Puhl-Snyman takes us all the way to the Western Cape and lifts the veil on what happens behind the workings of a quaint Stellenbosch wine farm. This book, that is inspired by her own journey of when she came to South Africa from America in the mid-80s, explores what can happen in a changing post-apartheid context when diverse people on one farm are forced to face off against one another. And to tell us more about this insightful offering that she dedicates to farm workers and farmers, Dr. Carol Puhl-Snyman joins us now via Zoom. Carol, a very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning, CP Wayne. Good morning to the listeners.
In your own words, Carol, briefly take us through what this book is all about.
Well, the Worlds Apart is based on an actual year-long experience that my husband and I had on our small grape-producing farm in the Western Cape, Stellenbosch. Things were going fairly well, and we worked as a team. It was the farm workers here and the farm owners there, and our houses were very close, side by side, and we got on very well. And then a huge gap opened up, and that gap between us and between the farm workers' family, and that was a big problem for us, and one we hadn't had before. And I wrote the book because I thought this gap was so important, because it wasn't just between us and them, but it was us and them. Us and them. We became us and them, and we. But it's also reflective of the gaps between people, the gaps between many South African groups, it's a human thing that can happen. And here it happened to us. So I wrote it because I thought we could reflect and learn from it. And I wanted to share with others. And I know that others, coming from academia, I knew about writing reports, but I didn't know about stories. And I figured that if I wanted people to read this experience, they're not going to read a report. I got to figure out how to write a story. So it took me a while to figure out how to write it down, and then it grew into a novel. So I was there. It is, and the setting is a functional farm, Belzig, which I made up, but it's rooted in the culture of the Western Cape. And the story is homegrown.
Yeah. You know, Carol, in your quest to reflect and learn from those experiences, what really haunted you so much that it pushed you into finally writing and telling this story?
See, anyway, it's the gap. The gap between farm owner and farm worker. And it has many aspects to it. And I'll just mention part of this gap. And first of all, the big question comes: how can my husband and I have so much, and how can they have so little? And it always worried me. And I knew it happens in the world. It's around the world. You just look around most places in the world. It's not rich, not real pleasant, but some people are filthy rich. Mm-hmm. So the gap is there. But now, how do you live with it? How do you deal with it? To some extent, you got to have your needs met. They have to have their needs met. So do we. But how can we bridge this gap? Okay.
Right, and
yes.
the book. The book centers around Catherine and Andre, who own a small wine farm. Just tell us more, Carol, how you use these characters to tell the story of not only the Cape Winelands, but farm living around the country in general.
Okay, the farm was productive. We have grapes, Cabernet Sauvignon for the wine industry. We just sell the grapes, and we don't make the wine. Okay. But we're on this small 4-hectare or 5-hectare plot, and here we are. I mean, we were professionals. We went to our jobs every day because we needed to support the farm, and the people, there was one farm worker family on that size farm. So one person worked for us, and riding on this one job were various people that came to live in the house there. And all right, you understand that families need to be together. This is right. He had a wife. He had some grown children and one or two growing children and grandchildren. And then, but then, of course, they took on partners. They had children. And pretty soon there were 9 people living in a 65 square meter cottage. And now, how can you improve the quality of life there? How can they get better? How can they get more things they want? How can we help? So education is my big answer, since my protagonist, Catherine, in the book was a teacher. Education is a big way, but it takes a long time. The people living there don't have that long. So we did what we could. But when this gap opened up, then everything stopped. And then it became not just unpleasant, but it became dangerous to live there.
And just picking up on your last point, Carol, I mean, just take us through how these two total perspective that the farmers and the farm workers have, especially within Andre and Catherine's great producing farm, and the toll this has had on their relationship.
Well, the conflict, at first, they just ignored us. And then, but now they ignored Catherine and Andre. But Catherine and Andre had different responses to that. Catherine says, but we have to talk. We have to sit down and work this out. But the farm people would not talk to us. They were totally on their own. They were independent. They were going to do things their way. And that was it. And the issue was they took in 3 visitors from the worker's girlfriend's family from another town, I think from Robertson or Worcester, and they brought them in as visitors, but then they never left. And then we could see that they really wanted them to live here. That would make the family into 12 people. So Andre in the story was adamant that they need to leave. And the people in the story got their backs up. No, they're not leaving. And after 3 months, he said, but this is enough time to visit. And they didn't go. So, but now Catherine wanted to say, well, let's, maybe they want education and things, but there was no movement in that direction. And Andre said, no, too many people, we can't bear them all. And I must say, later legislation from the time of the story bore that out, that the farm workers have rights, but so do the farmers. Balancing these rights is after the court.
Carol, this book is based on a true story. So one then wonders, why make this book a novel instead of a memoir or maybe an autobiography, for instance, as it addresses a whole lot of issues when it comes to all things farming dynamics. And one of the current important themes is the issue of farm murder. So how does this book touch on these?
Look, there are farm murders. There were a few in Stellenbosch. There are not so many because the farms aren't, while they're isolated, they aren't quite so isolated. And but it was a fear, because that's why I said it was dangerous, because when this rift opened up and we're at each other's throats, so to speak, and they would, the farm workers' family would sometimes toy. They would come right onto our stoop and shout for hours, and not once, many times. And we were worried. And then was rising militancy on the farms. People getting unionized. Other farms were evicting even workers. No, we did not want to do that. Definitely not. So we just wanted to work it out. but it got dangerous. And then Catherine noticed that there were people walking around, not farm worker people, but people like casing the joint, figuring out how they could come and how they
Carol,
could be
unfortunately we're out of time, but it was lovely chatting to you. Thank you so much for waking up on this cold Saturday morning and to be with us. We do appreciate your time. And this is really a scintillating and an interesting read. And, you know, it strikes so many resonance with so many people. Thank you so much, Carol.
Thank you so much, CP Way, and have a good day.